Hello, I'm Aperture Grills, and this is Spindizzy Worlds for the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, a port of an Amiga game that also saw release on Atari ST, Sharp X68000, and PC 98. This game, while it is a SNES game, has a very kind of old PC game feel, uh, and it's an unusual one for sure. This is a submission of Spindizzy, which there's two clusters, which are like galaxies of worlds. Spindizzy is the main one. The other one is Easy Dizzy, that's kind of supposed to introduce you to the game mechanics. So this will be Spindizzy on the easier difficulty, and the only thing that the difficulty changes is how fast you lose health um, when you fall off or get hurt by aliens. Uh, so being able to play it on the easier difficulty just means that we can play a couple sections a little bit faster. The difference otherwise is relatively minor. So I will start the video and explain as we go. I should also note that this video has no sound because I didn't correctly capture the game audio, but this game does have some quite fun music. So right off the bat, there's a skip that I found here on the beginning of beginners that you can kind of jump across rather than doing the intended route. Now, while this first bit of the game is playing out, I should explain how the controls work. So the D-pad actually moves you along the coordinates of this isometric world. So hitting up on the D-pad makes you go up and right in the game. And there's two buttons. There's A and B, or X and Y. They do the same. And A makes you go faster, so it makes you accelerate twice as fast as you normally do. And B makes you pretty much stop instantly, and then you can crawl around very slowly while holding down B. So the movement comes down to a combination of acceleration and stopping when you need to. And the skill cap for this movement is already like obviously crazy. I should mention that we've only started playing this game a couple months ago. No one is really that experienced at it. So this level, Pyramidia, has a skip on it that's kind of difficult to execute, and so I select that level early so that I can have a run that gets it reasonably quickly. And even then, you can see that I'm messing it up. The idea is to collect that floating gem rather than having to play a subworld that normally allows you to collect it, which you would do by falling in the hole in that pyramid. And instead, I'm just going to kind of use the corner of the pyramid as a ramp and jump up and collect it just like that. And then, unfortunately, that other gem on top of this pyramid we can't skip, and so you have to play through this sublevel, which has many long loading screens. It's one of the less fun parts of the game to play because you're just kind of sitting here waiting. You can see like just going upstairs in this pyramid takes a little while because you have to watch two loading screens. The goal here is to collect every single gem on the inside of this pyramid. Here I have to wait for that elevator to go up that's triggered by the blue switch. Now here's a little unintended thing you can do. You can take a diagonal off of this platform and actually get up onto the wall, which allows you to take a slightly faster line. That's something that Kevin DDR found. Now we have to go collect gems on the other side of the pyramid, and then we'll be done with this section. And on to more fun parts of the game. Here I buffer stop to make sure that I don't fall off the edge of that, because that lot loses me a bunch of time. Because of the colors that they chose for these tiles, it can be really difficult to tell what the actual geometry is here. So sometimes you just kind of have to play for a bit until it becomes clear what's overlapping what. And now we're basically at the end of this pyramid, which also means that we're at the end of Pyramidia, because this is the last piece of it that we need to do. This is kind of fun. When it turns on the elevator that takes you to the exit, it actually like jumps you into the air to hit the teleporter. And now that we're done, this hole opened in the green pyramid, and here, this bonus level, we can just skip. For reasons that aren't really very clear, the bonus levels are sometimes skippable by just falling off, and sometimes you have to collect everything to make them end, and sometimes you just can't make them end. This here that I'm about to do is a very difficult skip on Waterworks. There, it went first try. The intended way to do that is to fall in that teleporter in order to clear that sub-level so that you can make it past and get the gem. But this is a better way to do it. So that was another skip. Again, the idea was to get across where I was. Oh, wow! This level went really, really well in this run. I got all 3 of those skips my first try, and the only problem, looks like the only thing I had trouble with was actually getting back to the entrance. So the way that the game respawns you when you fall off is on whatever tile you last touched, and if that tile is like a steep slope facing towards a hole or something, then it can be kind of a trick to actually recover rather than just fall off over and over. Tripath, this is another level that has skips. I'm jumping over these holes that would normally teleport me to subworlds, like you'll see here. This one I can't really skip, and so it takes me to this little level. And there's 2 others like it that I do manage to skip, and they are longer than this one, so it's quite important to do that. And then that's the end of Tripath. Nice quick level. Let's see. Arrow Maze is so named because it makes heavy use of these arrow tiles. The arrow tiles propel you in the direction of the arrow, but you can fight them, and you can actually go the wrong way down arrow tiles if you have enough momentum. And so I think I try and do that here. Well, first I do that here to collect this gem on the other corner, and then I believe... so I actually missed that flag that I need to pick up to enable the elevator that leads to the end. So this time I get it, and then I have to bounce off the wall, right? Yeah. So that's much faster than the intended method of going all the way around on the glass blocks. And that was a little sloppy, but good enough. Now here, this is a slightly unintended method that I actually learned from the attract mode of the game, is to go this way and get that flag that I just grabbed. The more obvious way to do it is to go the other way, but that means that you have to play part of this level twice. Going this way means you only have to deal with it once, and then there's this nice little movement optimization there. So instead of doing what you're obviously supposed to, you just kind of skip across. So that was a mistake. I like landed where I wanted to, and then kind of fell off to the onto those wooden tiles again. Executing all of this in this 50-minute long game without making any mistakes like that is quite tough. And like I said, I haven't really been playing this that long yet, so definitely my movement should become more optimal as I keep practicing. Rollerama has 2 ways to go. We take the upper way because it's faster. which is going on these green tiles rather than going below on the blue path. And then here there's a minor skip where you stay right there on that and jump over to the ramp. There's a lot of times you'll see that kind of pattern of movement in this game where you're falling off some bridge onto a ramp because that's the way that you can fall off without falling so far that you'll crash. Now this is an example of a bonus level that you can't skip. And so I just drink some water and screw around. Radima, the first level, has a minor time save that I discovered where you can skip a gap on the way back. So this is another collect everything stage. You can see the frame rate gets markedly better the more stuff that I've picked up, which can actually be kind of awkward for gameplay because, your speed varies depending on how much of the level you've completed. This one can be frustrating because the hitboxes of those walls are kind of bigger than it looks like they should be. But I basically just have a route to go back and forth across the level, picking everything up. And then here, I do something fairly unintended, it seems. I'd skip that gap right off the bat and then go collect these on the right side of the level. I mean, I call it the right side because it's to the right as far as how you would navigate there with the D-pad, but really it's, the bottom right part of the level. The controls might seem really unintuitive at first, but after playing with them for an hour or two, I was pretty accustomed to which direction I needed to hit in order to go the right way. Something I don't think I mentioned yet is that in the canon of this game, the spinning top that you control is named Gerald, which is actually an acronym. Gerald is a land mapping unit. He's a robot, and you're piloting Gerald around to these strange lands to map them, I guess. And then, of course, when you finish mapping them, they explode in typical video game fashion. This level is a little unusual in that there's actually another stage that you have to play after something that feels like the bonus level. So I just kind of go around here to hit the appropriate switches and then jump across this gap and get the other 2 gems, and that immediately completes. Now this is the real bonus level, which luckily you can just fall off of. Now, this run is the current fastest recorded time, but as of earlier today, there were some more skips found, including a better route through Torture, which skips having to play any of this section I'm currently in. So there's definitely opportunities for me to improve this time markedly. We started playing this game because TBCR picked up a cart from East Starland when we were at AGDQ earlier this year, because it looked like the box art or the cart sticker art was neat. That's all. And then it turns out that it's actually a pretty fascinating little game that none of us had ever heard of before. And it doesn't seem like there had really ever been any serious attempts at speedrunning it. This part of Torture, I have a little improvement for right there, where you fly down onto that path. Again, this is a collect everything level. Sometimes the game is pretty cruel, and it actually gives you the exit teleporter, but if you go through it before collecting everything, it just takes you back to the beginning of the level instead. So there's a little bit of memorization about which levels you have to collect everything for. This level of torture is one of the probably the most unusual kind of level designs in the game. You have these like two sandy parts and this bridge that connects it. The bridge is kind of hard to fall off of there. It's easy to crash because you're falling a long distance. Crossing back this way on those gray platforms, on the other hand, is super easy. And then I have to get back on this bridge, and the perspective is really weird because there's actually a level of slope that's angled perfectly such that you can't see it. And that's torture. Buxton Cat is the fastest level in the game. I don't remember how well I did it here, but for an individual level in-game time, the record is 13 seconds. Because literally all you have to do is jump over those few pillars and then you reach the bonus stage, and that's the end of the level. So really optimal, you would end with 21 there. I ended with 20, so that was what, a 15? Yeah, certainly for an RTA attempt, that's decent. Oily Way, this is a very execution heavy level. It's one of my favorites. I came up with this little thing that I'm about to do here, which is to actually crash on that gem. The intended route is to jump over there and then you have to jump back, but since you collect it as you crash onto it, it's a lot faster to just do that because you're essentially teleporting yourself back to where you need to be anyway. There was a nice little skip there as well that I did. And then that's the end of this level because I've picked everything up. Getting back from here, it's actually kind of difficult. You can see I'm bouncing off because I'm not getting quite the speed that I need. And then there we go. This part of Oily Way, I found that you can skip sort of the right half and instead simply hit this switch. And then that switch is actually on top of a trampoline that you can use to jump over to the wall and then walk on, or, whatever, traverse the wall to get over to where you need to go to finish. This part requires hitting a sequence of switches. Really, it's just two, I guess. You hit the red switch, which turns on this island that you then jump to, like that, except I screwed it up, like that. And then from there, you go hit the blue switch here, which actually makes the exit appear. And then I have to make it back over to the exit without hitting any other switches, which would turn it off again. And then I just keep holding right there and get to it. This part has another cool little skip that TBCR found where you do that. You just run up the side of that ramp and then fall off, and you can actually land perfectly where you need to be. Now, there is a gap here that you can't see that I'm skipping, so you have to set it up a little carefully so that you actually make it. This is an unusual bonus level. A couple of them are like this. If I fall off, you're teleported back to where you spawn. So ideally, you will collect all the gems without ever falling off, because that would waste time. Let's see, this first part of Obelisk Run that's timed, I have a little bit of tech for, where after collecting the gem that's on the sandy part, I use part of the ramp to hop over to the blue part where the other gem is. Then here, you need to have these two platforms synced such that you do that and phase onto the yellow one. So I did it first try. And then here you have to lower the yellow and orange platforms enough that you can get down without crashing, which again, I did first try. And then here you have to have both of these switches turned on in order to exit. And the way that you do that is like that, to have the little jumping platform in the middle that they turn on, hop you over the other switch so you're on the outside of them. And that's also a little difficult to do. This screen is one of the few that vary majorly on the harder difficulty. These Amiga Ball enemies do just a ridiculous amount of damage on normal, which is what it's called in the Super Famicom version, or advanced as it's called in the US version. But on easy, they're not too punishing, so you can just kind of do this. It's also nice because killing more aliens means there's less lag. So, as you can see, this game does not hold 60 FPS or anywhere close. The performance is actually quite awful, and so doing things to reduce lag is important. In fact, this run actually loses some time because I didn't realize that some bonus stages that you have to wait to time out can actually be sped up by collecting gems to increase the frame rate. So we only realized that was a thing the other day, and I have not had a chance to play a better run yet. So here, this bonus level, unfortunately, you do have to complete, and there's a lot of moving around, and some sort of irritating gap skips that you have to get. Pack Attack is probably the least interesting level in the game. There's almost no tech. It's basically just a sequence of mazes, and there's tons of enemies and there's tons of collectibles, which means that the frame rate is lousy, which makes the game not play as well, and it's not great. Probably my least favorite level of the game to play. But it does have some redeeming qualities. One level of it coming up does have a neat little skip. And this level frequently uses the speed tech of bouncing off walls. So if you're headed towards something that you need to collect and then you want to turn around and go the other way, you can bounce off a wall by just, you keep holding A and switch the D-pad direction from towards the wall to away from the wall. And if you do it with the right timing, then you'll preserve almost all your speed, just like that. And then here, the frame rate's bad, so you can't really tell that I'm bouncing off the walls rather than stopping, but I am. So this is the part of Pack Attack that does have a little bit of a skip, but it comes right at the end. So first I'm just going through collecting these dots. So there's the skip. If you approach that from far enough away, you can actually get all the way up onto that wall, and it enables you to save having to go around that little piece of maze twice. Yeah, there's not a ton to talk about here. I'm pretty much just executing the fastest route that I found to collect everything. Very little in terms of interesting movement. It's just kind of try not to fall off, try not to get stuck on these walls in the corners. Here's one gap skip that I route in right there. collect these 4 in the center. That is some cool diagonal movement right there to cross the platforms a little more expeditiously. And then I can fall off the bonus level, and that's the end of Pack Attack. Now we're on to Sandy Island. This has a skip right at the beginning where instead of playing any of this first level, we just kind of, well, when I get it, you'll see. Hopefully you get this first try because it's actually a lot harder to do if you mess it up. Yeah. This could obviously be improved greatly by getting this skip first try. Because you can see I keep having to fall off and respawn up top to try again. There you go. So really you should get that immediately. Now this level might be the most frustrating part of the whole game because you have to time your movement to those freezing platforms, and there's not really much of an indication of when they're gonna raise. So you kind of have to internalize their rhythm. So there I got the first one first try and the second one second try. So that was pretty good. Now these green tiles, the green slime on the ground makes you move really slowly. So optimally you'll kind of slalom through. Also this puzzle sucks because if you get picked up by one of those elevators, then it throws you off and you crash on the ground and die. So you can see I kind of like go back and forth in a not quite optimal way. If you were really, really dialed in, you would be able to go back and forth, slalom between those green tiles without ever really stopping. But that's super hard to do. Grasshopper has a bunch of jumps across these little square islands. Have to wait for this elevator, so it doesn't really matter how fast you get there. And this is kind of an unavoidable sub-level that we have to visit because it takes us to another part of where we just were that we need to reach, and there's no other way to get there. So I have to play this. This is that was pretty good movement. Getting up on those little ramps that are facing off and facing off the edge of a ledge is tricky because you have to position yourself towards the end of them, and then sorry, I'm hearing noises from downstairs. What was I talking about? Right, this section is another one where you have to pick up all the collectibles. Ideally, this little pile of rocks you would be able to collect all the dots on in one pass, but that's actually really difficult to do. And you have to jump on that little tiny pyramid to reach that one. Have to hit the yellow switch because it turns on this elevator that I need to ride to get this flag. And then I jump across to get back here to the exit. Here involves some little tricky diagonal movement to get up those ramps. And then there's 2 minor skips here. One there, where you use and one there. Both where you're just kind of using the ramp to hop up higher than they intended you to be able to do. That's the end of Grasshopper. Now, Castle Quest is, well, takes place in a big walled fort. And first you have to enter the fort by turning on those 2 switches. I actually paused before turning on the second one in order to have these cycles lined up just like that, so that I get on the blue and then straight on the gray, rather than waiting. Now to get inside the castle, you have to land on those little bouncy pads, which the perspective on is slightly strange, so you can see I messed it up once. Then this blue switch turns on this blue platform that just oscillates back and forth. It's actually kind of random whether that picks you up and flings you over correctly the first time. Sometimes you have to come at it a few times in order for that to happen the way that you want it to. And then something I didn't mention yet is that you can actually switch the perspective in the game with the shoulder buttons, but just like everything else, the lag when it changes perspective is huge. It's several seconds, so we never want to. And that means that we end up having to play a couple sections blind. So you just have to memorize the layout there. These trampoline sections are really easy to mess up because the trampolines, depending on how fast you close with them, you can see like right here I'm messing it up just because I'm approaching them very slightly too slowly. You really have to start from exactly the right point on the platform in order to get the trajectory correct so that you land on the next one. And there's a couple other places where they throw series of trampolines at you, and you'll see again, it's quite frustrating. Here's a cool little skip I found to jump directly over to the exit. That's definitely not intended. And then this maze, it's just a maze. There's actually two ways to solve it, and I used to do the slow one until TBCR showed me that there's a faster solve. So this is the faster one. You hope that the aliens are generally off screen. That's what they call those like moving pyramids and all the other monsters. Because if they're not on screen, then the frame rate will be higher, which means you can move faster. I guess I should mention that one that I just timed out, you can't complete. So, or rather, you can, but it doesn't really help you. So, it just gives me a break. Ball race is a nice short stage, as the name race implies. Unfortunately, all of these stages that have a timer, they just used the music track to play a clock ticking noise, so there's no music for any of these. In other versions of the game, there is music that plays during them, and yeah, I wish it was there. So those are some minor. Well, I actually played that part kind of scrappy, but you saw a very minor route improvement due to a jump that I found. Just kind of take the faster line and get to the end, and then you can fall off that bonus level. Waterworld, this is another level that a route improvement was recently found to, and so it actually turns out that this level that I'm just about to enter, you don't have to play this at all. And that's great because I find this super frustrating. It's really easy to fall off of these little like ridged paths. So yeah, since we now know how to skip this, there's not really much to say. I'm just doing a route that collects all the gems. That's the requirement. And then that turns on the elevator. So this section is the first one you would see after the first level. This is another collect everything section. Has lots of aliens. I just kind of do a single circuit and then go through the center part of the level to go to the end, which, as far as I can tell, is the best route. Oh yeah, I should also mention the flags, those little like red pennants that you collect. Um, in addition to being another type of collectible that you sometimes need, they also make you invincible for a short time. And when Gerald is flashing after you've picked one up, that means that you won't take damage when you run over an enemy. So this bonus stage, it turns out you can make it finish almost twice as fast by collecting a bunch of the dots, because it makes the frame rate higher. So here I'm losing time by not doing anything here, but I didn't know it at the time. Yeah, so not collecting that stuff at the beginning probably cost me maybe 30 seconds. So now you can see the number of levels remaining is steadily dwindling. Canalside, the first part of this level involves getting onto this little island here, by hitting the yellow switch, which raises that gargoyle head on the far side, and then kind of blindly getting yourself inside the hole that it uncovers. Because, like I said, we never want to change perspective. Collect those 2 flags on the roof, and then ride the elevator down. And then from here, we just go to the right and play this section, and that's the end of the level. So we get a pennant, and then we go get a bunch of gems. This is a little tricky because you have to fall onto the side of that rather than the center. If you fall on the center, you'll crash. And then your time requirement is actually pretty lax here because you can just wait for the you have to wait for that platform anyway. And then here is one of the most difficult completable bonus stages. You do save time by beating it rather than waiting for it to time out, but completing it before the timer runs out is actually pretty tricky. And I usually only get it with like 5 to 10 seconds to spare. Well, displayed seconds, so really like half that. So having 13 left is actually pretty good for me. Misdirection, this is another play a bunch of sub-level levels or worlds. This one is probably one of the most infuriating puzzles in the game until you get used to it. You have to follow that path of red switches in order to get up there, and then very carefully get up onto this green switch, jump over on the trampolines that it creates to hit the yellow switch, and then follow this little path back. And if you hit any of those blue switches, then you'll have to do the entire puzzle over again. So it's really aggravating. The second section is this weird trampoline checkerboard. I have a route to collect it all pretty fast, which involves running along the trampoline sections. If you just wait long enough on a trampoline tile, you'll eventually stop and you can move like normal. So that's what I do. And then I just fall off for no reason, you know. This part of misdirection is very difficult for a beginning player because it involves traversing so many steeply angled slopes. Once you have a really good grasp on how the movement works, it becomes a lot easier to do this, but it's still not easy. And again, I have to collect all the gems here, or the teleporter will just take me back to the beginning and I'll have to do this all over again. And here I repeatedly fail easy movement, just because I wasn't in quite the right spot. Here you can kind of do a cool little, yeah, back and forth. That can be done even smoother than I did, but that was pretty smooth. And then here, it's a little faster to fall onto that ramp rather than going around. And now we play the sort of icy section of Misdirection, the first part of which is probably the hardest, where I just have to make it between these two pillars, which means you basically can't change your trajectory when on ice, or at least it's very, you have very little control. So you have to get your trajectory right coming onto the ice, and doing that correctly is pretty precise. And then here, I have a strat for skipping the end of the level by just very, well, I messed it up a few times, but very precisely making it around that corner. And then that's the end of Misdirection. So we just wait on this elevator until it takes us up. And then actually we do have to play this bonus stage, which involves taking the lowest route. Fortunately, falling off doesn't teleport you to the beginning. And then this one actually has an exit, so I just fall on the exit. Phrygia, another quite short level, has so I minorly messed that up, not making it to the exit right off the bat, but not a major problem. Here I have a precise like x-axis lineup to make it so that I land on the edge of the gray surface after bouncing off the wall. That's the fastest way I could find to get over there. This is another pick up all the gems level, so you just kind of go in a circle. You can see I'm kind of inserting some diagonal movement into getting around these because it's faster, but more and more of that will definitely improve the sort of fluidity of the movement in the run. Now this part actually has a really neat little skip that TVCR found. You're supposed to hit a bunch of switches, but it turns out if you just hit this last one, the yellow one, you can get on the platform that it turns on as it's rising, and that'll take you straight to the exit. So that skip's a really irritating puzzle. Now here is another level that I actually should have picked up the gems on in order to increase the frame rate. Like I said, I didn't know at the time. Okay, Tower City. This is the last level that I played in this run before Spindizzy. This is mostly easy, except that it has one of the most difficult jumps and skips in the game. So instead of playing one of the sub levels that they want you to, we jump across and land on the pillar that contains the gem that we need. And I'm gonna do that now that I've finished this icy sub level. Okay, so I fall off the back here, so I spawn in a known location. And then I got it first try in this run, which was actually really good for me. Usually it takes me a couple tries to land dead on. And then you have to play the last section, which is really annoying because you can't see where you are, and it has a really low frame rate. I actually use a dot on my screen, much like classic FPS speedrunners, so that I know where the center tile is. It helps to line Gerald up for some of this stuff. And you can see I still mess it up. Our next goal is to turn on this green platform, and then ideally we'll get back to it before it raises the first time. So hit the switch, and then try and make it back as quickly as possible. And I made it. It costs quite a bit of time if you do not make it. Maybe 10 seconds or so. And then just kind of fall onto the exit. And that's all the gems on this section collected. So now we take that little elevator down in the water, and that's the end of Tower City. So now we're on to Spindizzy, the last level of the game. It comes in 3 sections. This first section, you can see the very first thing that happens is that you hit those 4 switches that turn on 4 electric gates, and then you have to play 4 sub-levels in order to access the switches to turn them off. And ideally, you'll play them in a particular order so that when you go over to pass through the gates, they're all turned off. If you do them in the wrong order, then you would have to go back and futz with it more. But of course, I know which order to play them in. Here's another one where the strat on normal changes, because like I said, getting crushed by these Amiga balls on normal or advanced, same thing, hurts a lot. So you can't really afford to take all these hits. But I take them on easy because, again, it increases the frame rate. This one is probably the least interesting of those 4 sub-levels that you play. You just have to go get all the flags here, and you're bounded by walls, so there's not much you can do in the way of good movement. Other than bouncing here. Well, I actually didn't even do that. So now we're finally on to the last. And here you can see what I was talking about earlier. I have particular setups to make these trampoline jumps a little more consistent, which is why I get them all. But if you don't know exactly where to start from, it can be super annoying. You'll just fall off over and over and over. So that's that for part 1 of Spindizzy. Part 2 is a teleporter maze. So if I go the wrong way in any of these branches, then I'll end up back at the very beginning of this level. Luckily, I know where to go, so. And now we're on to part 3. Now this has 4 floating islands that have teleporters on them, and they each have a dot that I need to collect. But some of them, it turns out, you can actually line yourself up and go at them such that you crash and collect the dot like that. So that meant that I just skipped a whole sub-level of this final section of Spindizzy, and it's quite an annoying one, so I really like being able to do that. And then again, I was able to skip this one on the left. Luckily, that one, the dot is not on the same tile as the teleporter, so it's a lot easier to skip. In this run, I did not try and skip the other 2. I haven't found consistent setups for it yet, so I just don't bother. This one's quite short because of a skip that I found. Instead of going all the way around, I get on that yellow wall here, which is definitely not intentional, or not intended, rather. And then that you can gap skip directly over to the teleporter. And now there's one final section I need to play, which is on the right here. This is a invisible platform maze. The dots tell you where to go, but on your way back to the beginning, you don't have the dots to guide you, so you have to memorize where the platforms are. And as you can see, I have done that. And we're really, really closing in on the end of the game now. I just need to collect the last few flags in the corners. Well, just that last one. And that's it. This teleporter takes you to this little screen that says, well done, the planet is disintegrating. And then you wait a couple seconds while all the aliens run around. And then that's the end of the game. Bam. Just like that, Spindizzy is destroyed. And then it says, well done, now try normal. And there is actually a more in-depth ending that you get if you complete the game on normal instead of easy. But like I said, it's a little harder, and I think it's a little slower. So easy is what we've been competing on for now, and that's what we're submitting. Once again, I'm Aperture Grills. This is Spindizzy Worlds for the SNES and Super Famicom. I think it's cool. It's the skill cap on the movement in this game is totally insane. We've only been playing it for like maybe 2 months so far, and a lot of that has been strat finding. So definitely, it can be quite a spectacle, I think. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. Until next time.